Hi, everybody. Here we go. Warhorse, chapter 20. A lot of excitement has been going on the last few chapters. So go ahead and make sure you follow along as I read out loud and annotate as I am reading. Okay, we're on chapter 20, page 151. There was an air of determined conspiracy in the yard that day. Whispering groups of men in dripping overcoats, their collars turned up to keep the rain their rain from their necks, huddled together, their voices low and earnest. Albert seemed scarcely to notice me all day. He would neither talk to me nor even look at me, but hurried through his daily routine of mucking out, haying up, and grouping in the deep and gloomy silence. I knew, as every horse in the yard knew, that we were threatened. I was torn with anxiety. An ominous shadow had fallen on the yard that morning, and not one of us could settle in our stables. When we were led out for exercise, we were jumpy and skittish, and Albert, like all the other soldiers, responded with impatience, jerking sharply at my halter, something I had never known him to do before. That evening, the men were still talking, but now Sergeant Thunder was with them, and they all stood together in the darkening yard. I could see in the last of the evening light that glint of money in their hands. Sergeant Thunder carried a small tin box that was being passed around from one to the other, and I heard the clink of coins as they were dropped in. The rain had stopped now, and it was a still evening, so that I could just make out Sergeant Thunder's low, growling voice. That's the best we can do. That's the best we can do, boys, he was saying. That's not a lot, but then we haven't got a lot, have we? No one ever gets rich in this man's army. I'll do the bidding, like I said. It's against orders, but I'll do it. Mind you, I'm not promising anything. He paused and looked over his shoulder before going on. I'm not supposed to tell you this, boys. The major said not to. And make no mistake, I'm not in the habit of disobeying officers' orders, but we aren't at war anymore. And anyway, this order was more like advice, so to speak. So I'm telling you this because I wouldn't like you to think badly of the major. He knows what's going on right enough. Matter of fact, the whole thing was his own idea. It was him that told me to suggest it to you in the first place. What's more, boys, he's given us every penny of his pay that he had saved up. Every penny. It's not much, but it'll help. Of course, I don't have to tell you that no one says a word about this. Not one word. If this was to get out, then he gets the boot, like all of us would. So mum's the word. Clear? Have you got enough, Sarge? I could hear it. I could hear that it was Albert's voice speaking. I'm hoping so, son, Sergeant Thunder said, shaking his box. I'm hoping so. Now let's all of us get some shut-eye. I want you lazybones up bright and early in the morning, and them horses looking their thundering best. It's the last thing we'll be doing for them. Least we can do for them, seems to me. And so the group dispersed, and the men walking away in twos and threes, shoulders hunched against the cold, their hands deep in their overcoat pockets. One man only was left standing by himself in the yard. He stood for a moment, looking up at the before walking over towards my stable. I could tell it was Albert from the way he walked. It was that rolling farmer's gait, with the knees never quite straightening up after each stride. He pushed back his peak cap as he leaned over the stable door. I've done all I can, Joey, he said. We all have. I can't tell you any more, 'cause I know you'd understand every word I'd said. And then you'd only worry yourself sick with it. This time, Joey, I can't even make you a promise like I did when Father sold you off to the army. I can't make you a promise because I don't know whether I can keep it. I asked Old Thunder to help, and he helped. I asked the Major to help, and he helped. And now I've just asked God, because when all's said and done, it's all up to him. We've done all we can, that's for certain sure. I remember old Miss Wordle telling me once in Sunday school back home, God helps those that helps themselves. Mean old devil she was, but she knew her scriptures well enough. God bless you, Joey. Sleep tight. And he put out his clenched fist and rubbed my nuzzle, and then stroked each of my ears in turn before leaving me alone in the dark of the stables. It was the first time he had talked to me like that since the day David had been reported killed, and it warmed my heart just to listen to him. The day dawned bright over the clock tower, throwing the long, lean shadows of the poplars beyond across the cobbles that glistened with frost. Albert was up with the others before reveille was blown, so that by the time the first buyers arrived in the yard in their carts and cars, I was fed and watered and groomed so hard that my winter coat gleamed red as I was let out into the morning sun. The buyers were gathered in the middle of the yard and we were led, all those that could walk around the perimeter of the yard in a grand parade before being brought out one by one to face the auctioneer and the buyers. I found myself waiting in my stable, watching every horse in the yard being sold ahead of me. I was, it seemed, to be the last to be brought out. Distant echoes of an earlier auction sent me suddenly into a feverish sweat, but I forced myself to remember Albert's reassuring words of the night before, and in time my heart stopped racing. So when Albert led me out into the yard, I was calm and easy and sat in my stride. I had unswerving faith in him, and he patted my neck gently and whispered secretly in my ear. There were audible and visible signs of approval from the buyers as he walked me around in a tight circle, bringing me at last to a standstill facing a line of red, craggy faces and gasping, greedy eyes. Then I noticed in among the shabby coats and hats of the buyers the still tall figure of Sergeant Thunder towering above them. And to one side, the entire veterinary unit lined up along the wall and watching the proceedings anxiously. The bidding began. I was clearly much in demand, for the bidding was swift to start with, but as the price rose, I could see more heads shaking, and very soon there seemed to be only two bidders left. One was Old Thunder himself, who would touch the corner of his cap with his stick, almost like a salute to make his bid, and the other was a thin, wiry little man with weasel eyes, who wore on his face a smile so full of consummate greed and evil that I could hardly bear to look at him. Still the price moved up at 25, 26, at 27. 27 I'm bid. On my right, 27 I'm bid. Any more, please? It's against the sergeant there. And 27. Any more, please? He's a fine young animal, as you see. Got to be worth a lot more than this. Any more, please? But the sergeant was shaking his head now. His eyes looked down and acknowledged defeat. Oh, God, no, I heard Albert whisper beside me. Dear God, not him. He's one of them, Joey. He's been buying all morning. Old Thunder says he's the butcher from Cambrai. Please, God, no. Well then, if there are no more bids, I'm selling to Monsieur Carrick of Cambrai at 27 English pounds. That is all. Selling for 27. Going. 28, came a voice from among the buyers, and I saw a white-haired old man leaning heavily on his stick, shuffled slowly forward through the buyers until he stood in front of them. I'm bidding 28 of your English pounds, said the old man, speaking in hesitant English, and I'll bid for so long as so high as I need to. I advise you, sir, he said, turning to the butcher of Cambrai. I advise you not to try to outbid me. For this horse, I will pay 100 English pounds if I must do. No one will have this horse except me. This is my Ellie's horse. It is hers by right. Before he spoke her name, I had not been quite sure that my eyes and ears were not deceiving me, for the old man had aged many years since I had last set eyes on him, and his voice was thinner and weaker than I remember. But now I was sure this was indeed Emily's grandfather, standing before me, his mouth set with grim determination, his eyes glaring around him, challenging anyone to try and outbid him. No one said a word. The butcher for Cambrai shook his head and turned away. Even the auctioneer had been stunned into silence, and there was some delay before he brought his hammer down on the table, and I was sold. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of chapter 20. Please make sure you go and do your annotating and reread the chapter so you can answer the questions.